We're live, Lisa.
Okay. If you guys can mute your phones, I can get the time. Good evening. And welcome to Assemblymember Rodney Bichot Hermelin's Excluded Workers Fund Informational Webinar. We are happy to have you join us this evening. Many of you are here this evening because you were impacted by COVID, but for reasons you were not able to collect unemployment or other benefits. We have a panel of speakers who can explain new options that's available on how you can take advantage of it. Tonight's webinar will be translated in 3 languages: Haitian Creole, Spanish, and Urdu. If you prefer to hear this presentation in any of the 3 languages, you may select the globe at the bottom of your screen and choose the preferred language. Molly?
Buenas tardes. Para acceder a la interpretación en español, presione el icono del globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la pantalla de su computadora y luego seleccione la opción Español. Repito, para acceder a la interpretación en español, presione el icono del globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la pantalla de su computadora y luego seleccione la opción Español. Gracias.
Felix? Oh, Vanessa?
Sur tablette, on des messages en créole. Pesez globe là, par en bas écran. Et puis, ou attendez message pour en créole. Sur tablette, on des messages en créole. Pesez globe là, par en bas écran. Et puis, attendez message en créole.
Zubair?
आप लोग अगर कोई भी लैंग्वेज सेलेक्ट करना चाहते हैं, उर्दू में हम ट्रांसलेट करेंगे, स्पेनिश में और हिंदी लैंग्वेज में, तो जो भी आपने सेलेक्ट करना हो आपकी लैंग्वेज बॉटम स्क्रीन पे आ रही होगी, आप उसको क्लिक करके उसमें दाखिल हो सकते हैं। शुक्रिया।
I'll give all of those who need translation a few seconds to select their language before we get started. Okay, now to get us started, we have greetings and welcome remarks from our Assembly member, Rodney Bichot Hermelin. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us this evening, but she is here in presence. Just the same, please welcome Assembly member Bichot Hermelin.
Good evening. I'm Assemblymember Rodney Bichot Hermelin, and I represent Flatbush, Midwood, and Ditmas Park neighborhoods in the state legislature. Before we begin, I want to thank our sponsors, the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Make the Road, New York, Council of People's Organization, Haitian American Caucus, and New York Communities for Change. Tonight, we're here to talk about the Excluded Workers Fund, what it is, who qualifies, when you can apply, and what you need to qualify. This year in Albany, my colleagues and I passed a budget that includes $2.1 billion to help New Yorkers who lost work during the COVID-19 pandemic, but could not get unemployment insurance or other federal benefits. My office fielded more calls from people facing unemployment than any other issue during 2020. And I know that despite our best efforts, many of you were turned away from those benefits, though no fault of yours. As the daughter of immigrants and as the first generation American, I recognize the contributions of our diverse population. That's why I proudly support legislation to create an Excluded Workers Fund Today, I'm happy to say we did it. But it's not over. The opportunity to access these resources is in your hands. Eligible workers will receive one of 2 tiers of benefits. Depending on the level of documentation of work and earnings you are able to provide during the application process. Tier 1, applicants who are able to show certain proof of their employment and earnings, total benefit of $15,600 minus an automatically deducted tax of $780. Tier 2, applicants with some proof, but without the required proof for Tier 1, total benefit is $3,200 minus an automatically deducted tax of $160. But you have to apply. That's why my office, together with our sponsors, are here to guide you through the process. I want to make sure that as many eligible workers as possible qualify for these benefits. Application open next month. Make sure you are first in line. Thank you for joining us this evening. Now I'll hand it over to my Chief of Staff, Lisa Derry. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bichot-Hermelin. Now, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Zachary Lerner. Zachary is the organizing director at New York Community for Change, representing 20,000 members in New York that fight for immigrants' rights, housing, economic justice, and more. New York Community for Change was a key organization in fighting for the Excluded Workers Fund. We'll now have Zachary give a little overview about the advocacy surrounding the Excluded Workers Fund. Welcome, Zachary.
Thank you for having me on. Once again, my name is Zachary Lerner. I'm at New York Communities for Change. You know, I think as many people know, and as the Assembly member mentioned in her speech, that throughout this pandemic, you know, it's been a crisis that where folks lost their jobs, lost income, along with many people losing their lives and things like that. And so one of the things, while there was a lot of relief that went around, for people who are undocumented and many others, they were left hanging with nothing, you know, nothing to actually support them and no relief from the government or anything else. And so they depended on, you know, pantry lines and others just to be able to eat. And so the campaign to actually fight to create a fund for excluded workers, those who have been excluded from any type of relief during this pandemic, was formed, in which people throughout New York State, excluded workers, actually were in the streets fighting even during the pandemic, where we had people who were actually sleeping outside in parks, you know, to actually put pressure on a lot of folks in the legislature to actually, you know, raise taxes on the wealthy so that we could actually pay for something while, you know, our communities were actually suffering. And so, you know, throughout the past year and a half, a lot of folks came together, thousands of excluded workers around the state were lobbying, working with people like the Assembly member to actually create this historic first of its kind fund. And that was through people taking action such as blocking bridges. Even both the Manhattan-Brooklyn Bridge were blocked as part of this, and using direct action along with advocacy to actually make this happen and make sure people's voices were heard. And actually the pain and suffering that was happening in communities was actually, you know, going to lead to real relief here in New York. And so this all culminated in a 23-day hunger strike in which over 100 people across New York State participated in not eating and doing various actions, events, and other things for a 23-day period to put pressure on our New York State government, and with that, you know, with the support of many legislators, to make sure that there was actually relief payments that could go out for the people who've been left out this entire time and excluded. And so there's a lot of work that went into this. There's a lot of work going forward, but as the Assembly member said, we now have there's a huge fund that is opening just in the next week or so. And so I really want to turn it over to, so a lot of work went into this, and I want to turn it over to Ana Ramirez, who is a member of New York Communities for Change and also lives here in Flatbush and participated she was an excluded worker and went on hunger strike for 23 days. So no food for 23 days to make sure that we could actually see this fund become real, and we can actually see this historic fund happen here in New York. And hopefully this will lead to more of that happening across the country, so we provide relief to the people who've been excluded from everything else while being deemed essential. And so I'm going to pass it to Ana, who is going to speak in Spanish, and then I will provide some interpretation afterwards. So Ana.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Ana Ramírez y soy un miembro activo de la organización NYCC. Bueno, primeramente quiero agradecer el espacio que nos dan para poder llevar el mensaje de victoria, que logramos ganar de 2.1 billones de dólares para trabajadores indocumentados que trabajan en la ciudad de Nueva York. Pero realmente quiero poner en lo alto que esto fue a nivel mundial, a nivel histórico. Esta victoria fue demasiado importante para el área laboral. Les quiero hablar un poco de mi trabajo que yo he hecho en la ciudad de Nueva York. He trabajado en el área restaurantera por muchos años, el cual yo he venido pagando taxes y he sido una buena ciudadana como muchos otros trabajadores. Pero lamentablemente llegó COVID-19 y yo no pude aplicar para el fondo de trabajadores, para el seguro de fondo de trabajadores, y el cual nos vimos como trabajadores y como gente excluida, nos vimos en la necesidad de incluso ir a dormir afuera del hombre más rico del mundo, que fue Jeff Bezos, afuera de su casa. Tuvimos que cerrar 2 puentes que conectan de los condados hacia la ciudad de Nueva York. Tuvimos que hacer una huelga de 23 días, el cual en mi caso personal fue muy difícil porque el dejar de comer o alimentar el cuerpo con las vitaminas que necesitamos realmente se siente un desnivel físico. Mi experiencia y con la de los demás compañeros huelguistas fue muy difícil, pero nos da fuerza saber que habíamos trabajado, que no nada más es Nueva York la ciudad más importante del mundo, sino que Nueva York recibe a la gente con más valor de todas partes del mundo. Yo me siento orgullosa de no pertenecer simplemente a esta ciudad tan importante, sino también ser una persona con mucho valor como la de mis compañeros. Hoy por hoy celebramos porque nuestras comunidades se va a ver reflejada la economía a nosotros poder recibir esta gran ayuda económica. Claro que en muchos hogares donde se limitaron de comprar artículos y cosas muy importantes para subsistir, pues con este gran fondo que nosotros logramos, gracias a esta gran lucha, pues se hace la victoria y podemos contar con la victoria. Y agradeciéndole a personas como ustedes que pueden ser la voz de todos nosotros, que hay gente como ustedes que se preocupan por la comunidad, que trabajan por la comunidad. Bueno, yo quisiera contarles a detalle más de esta victoria, pero ustedes la conocen y pues muchas gracias en nombre de todos mis compañeros y de la comunidad indocumentada, trabajadora. Gracias.
All right. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ana Ramirez. I am an active member of NYCC. Thank you for making the space to share the message of victory, an accomplishment of $2.1 billion for undocumented New Yorkers across the state. But first, I want to say this was a key labor rights victory too, beyond the impact for immigrants. I have worked hard for over 10 years in the restaurant industry. I did my best to contribute to my community and in the workforce. And when COVID hit, even though I had given so much to this country, nothing was given to me. So we took action. We slept outside the home of Jeff Bezos. We shut down bridges, and I went on a 23-day hunger strike. I felt sick. I felt weak, but I had to keep going. It was so hard. We didn't eat for 23 days, but I did it because I carried my immigrant family on my back, and I know that the victory was not just for New York, but for immigrants around the world to see what is possible when you take action, even if it means putting your body on the line. Now I get to see real money come back to us. Now I get to see my community breathe, feel just a little less stress on their shoulders. This victory is for all of us. It's time to get to work. And so I can pass it back. So that was for Anna, and I can pass it back to Lisa to move us on in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach, for sharing that information with us. I would, and thank you for your advocacy around this. And we appreciate all the information that Anna was able to share with our community. Thank you very much. Now we'd like to move on to Annalise Solis. Annalise Solis is the lead organizer of Make the Road New York and helping lead the charge to fund excluded workers across New York State. Today, she will be discussing the details of how this whole thing works and how you can apply. Welcome, Annalise.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for making this space. I see 66 people on this call right now. And I want to ground the next part of this conversation in that you have a responsibility, whether you are an excluded worker or not, whether you are translating, whether you are listening, whether you are watching. I am now charging you with the responsibility to take note of very critical information. In a moment, I'm going to talk about how you start preparing your documents and how you stay engaged on top of the Fund Excluded Workers application process so that you don't miss an opportunity to get access to this benefit. So 66 people on this call, that's 68. I'm seeing 68 people, 68 families. That means people that are going to go back to others and share this information. I'm going to be sharing a couple links in the chat for panelists and for attendees. I'll also be sharing my screen, but this would be the moment to get up, grab a notepad, grab a pen, and take notes because there's a lot of information and you don't want to miss what comes next. So the first thing that I want to say before we jump in here is that the Excluded Worker Fund program, just like my colleague Zach and Ana Ramirez just shared, this is new. This is the first time it's ever been done in the history of this country. It is the largest economic assistance package for undocumented immigrants in the history of this country. New York just set a new standard. Assemblymember Bishot's leadership on this issue set a new standard for how undocumented immigrants can be treated during a pandemic. So the first thing before we get into everything is that let's address some misconceptions around the Excluded Worker Fund. You do not need a Social Security number to apply. I have unfortunately heard this from a lot of my own community members. I also live in the Assembly Members District. I'm here in Flatbush, Anna is too. And a lot of people think you need a Social Security number. That is not the case. This is a fund particularly meant for undocumented workers, people who, because of their immigration status, do not get unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance or other forms of federal relief. So even if you work off the books, even if you don't have a valid Social Security number, even if your visa expired years ago when you came here, this fund is meant for you. But we're going to talk in a little bit about what sort of requirements you need to meet in order to apply. Okay, so as you can see here in my screen, these are some of the basic eligibility requirements. I'm going to go through these slowly, and there's a lot of information. Starting with who is eligible. You must be living in New York State now. So if you lived in New York State and if you moved, it will be tough to get access to this relief fund. You also had to have lived in New York State before March 27th, 2020. So about a month after the massive unemployment crisis hit our communities. You can have moved and lived somewhere else in the time of the pandemic, but absolutely have to prove that you lived here before March 27, 2020. And these again are the rules of the state, they're not my own. You must also have lost wages or income after February 2020 because of unemployment, inability to work, or, and this is really important, if you or someone that you know lost a family member or a breadwinner, someone in the home who brought in most of the income, you can apply on their behalf, meaning you are eligible for this benefit, even if you were not working, but the person who brought income into your household was. So if a breadwinner passed to COVID, you are eligible to this benefit, or if they had a disability. You also must be ineligible for UI, as I noted before, and have earned $26,208 or less between April 19th of last year and April 19th of this year. So top line, you're not eligible, you made under $26,208, and you lived here in New York before the pandemic hit. And remember, you may also apply for a family member who passed due to COVID or has a disability and can no longer bring in income. What does the fund offer? As the Office of the Assembly Member mentioned, there are 2 benefit tiers. In a moment, we'll talk about the documents that you need. It's really important that you pay attention to all of the documents available, as well as the ones that will become available in time, because your documents add up in a point system. That means you can get either tier 1 at $15,600 or tier 2 at $3,200. I want to be very clear. This is before taxes. So it is not state taxes. So it is around $15,600 minus a couple $100 for taxes. But those are the final amounts for now. $15,600 pre-tax or $3,200 pre-tax. When and how can, and I also want to say this, payments will be made on a debit card. However, those debit cards can be used at ATMs in order to take out cash, to pay back loans, or use for whatever purposes you need, pay back medical bills, put groceries on the table, support friends and family. This money is meant for you and your family. This is relief money. But the form of payment will come in debit cards that are accessible at ATMs. We do not know the exact date of the Excluded Worker Fund application launch, but we are hearing it is the first week of August. So that means next week. That means that you've got a couple days to go under your mattress, call your mother, get everyone in the house together to figure out where all of the important documents might be in your household so that you can get everything ready and be the first one in line to apply. Now, when can you apply? First week of August. There is, as of right now, not a certain application closure date, but that does not mean that it can come. So it's really important that you don't say to yourself, oh, I'll just figure it out eventually, or I'll get to it. No. These funds are finite. This is not a permanent program as of right now, unfortunately. We need to fight to make it one. But for right now, there's a limited amount of money. So that means the people paying attention on this call, you want to make sure you're at the front of the line if you really need it. Because by the time you get everything together, if you wait, it might not be there. We expect though, however, and we're hoping that it will be several months that this application is open, but that's why we're getting this information out. Get your documents ready so you can apply. As you can see here, well, I'll share in a little bit on where exactly you can apply, but I wanna make sure to pay attention to this. A lot of undocumented immigrant workers are scared. I'm not going to go to the Department of Labor. I'm not going to give my information. I'm not going to pay taxes or do my taxes this year because they'll use that to deport me or to, use my information in ways that are unsafe for me and my family. That's a very valid fear. But for right now, this legislation prohibits the department. It is illegal for the department to share your information, not even inside of the Department of Labor, apart from the Excluded Workers Fund program, can your application information be shared. That means that your application information, your name, your address, the information that you provide, unless fraud is committed on an application, there is no way that this can be reported back to ICE, federal agencies, state agencies, or other local city agencies. So that means that your information is safe. There are criminal penalties to the Department of Labor for providing any information on your application, and that's not going to happen. And I want to make sure to say that we have seen this in the past. Driver's licenses, there was no information sharing from that program as well, DACA and more. This is a safe program to apply to. It is meant for you. Going to get into some document points to move us along. All of this information can be found on the Fund Excluded Workers website. So if someone wants to drop that in the chat, maybe Zach want to drop it in, fundexcludedworkers.org, and I'll show you how to get to the resource page. So you're going to need to prove a couple things. 1, identity. 2, residency. 3, work eligibility. But let's start with identity. You're going to need to get to a total of several points in the application. You can use a non-expired state driver's license or a non-driver identification card. If you're here in New York City, go ahead and get an ID NYC. You can call 311. Again, that's call 311, say ID NYC, and get your appointment, because that will help you just on the whole identity section. If you have that one card, you have 4 points for identity right there. If you do not have these documents that you see, you can add up to the 4 points by using other documents. The Department of Labor will be accepting passports from other countries that are expired for less than 2 years, and consulate IDs as well. Expired and non-expired consulate IDs as long as they're under 2 years. We are pushing to expand this as much as we can. You can also use a couple other documents. So again, use everything you have in your house in case it counts. Marriage certificates, photo identification cards. You will need to have something with your photo on it. Foreign birth certificates, diplomas from a high school, college, or university. If you participate in a community organization like NYCC or Make the Road, homeless shelters, charity organizations, food pantries, they can also provide an identification for you, and there will be more instructions on what that looks like down the road. That's identity. Residency. The driver's license will count if it's not expired, along with an ID NYC that will also count. And then 2 of the following. You will need one before March 27th, 2020, and then one after March 20, 2021. So you're going to need 2 documents that show you were here before the pandemic and one that shows you're here now, after March 20th of 2021. That can be a copy of your utility bill. That can be a bank or a credit card statement, a current lease, or a mortgage statement. It can also include letters from NYCHA or letters from homeless shelters or organizations that provide services to you. How am I doing? All right. I'm going to try to go through it a little faster. But Tier 1 benefits. Tier 1 is the $15,600. Tier 2 is $3,200. I'm going to answer this now. There is no middle ground. You get one of those. So it's on you to make sure you have as much as possible in order to get to the maximum benefit. There are some serious barriers to get to Tier 2, but we're going to run through ways to prepare in case some of those barriers are eased up on. Just yesterday, we were outside of the office of Governor Cuomo demanding that he expand access to this program. So start preparing everything you see on this screen and what I'm saying now, but also keep your eyes open before the application launches, because there could be more options. It's really important that people know this. There could be more options. Tier 1 benefits. Okay. A tax return for either of these, 2018 or 2019 or 2020. Not all 3 years, can be one of those, using a valid ITIN number. A lot of people think undocumented workers don't pay taxes. That's not true. A lot of undocumented immigrants and workers pay billions into an unemployment system that they can't access. This is you getting your money back, right? So if you can demonstrate, and it's not too late to do your taxes, you can still do your taxes. A tax return using a valid ITIN number, or attempt to file for an ITIN and use that receipt, you will have a really good chance of getting to that 15,000. I'm going to repeat this. You do not need an ITIN or a tax return to qualify for the maximum benefit. It will help you. Again, you do not need a tax return or an ITIN for the maximum benefit, but it will really help you if you get it. The other option is a letter from your employer. I know a lot of us, especially undocumented workers, don't want to go to a boss and say, please provide me a letter that says you hired me. But this is a moment that they need to return the favor. The same protection for you as an applicant is applied to your employer. If your employer gives you a letter, the department cannot share that information with city, state, or federal agencies. That letter can only be used for your application. So that means if your employer provides a letter, he might get a call just to confirm it's him, he or she or they. But beyond that, it is solely the Excluded Worker Fund program at the DOL, the Department of Labor, that will use that letter. I'm going to show an example of the letter that people can screenshot, take pictures. But for now, this is the moment to be going to your employers or clients if you clean homes, and asking for a letter of employment, because that is the next best way to get to 15,600. Other ways to show are 6 weeks of pay stubs or wage statements. So go back and get your pay stubs or wage statements from November 19th to April 19th. If you can, that is your legal right to request them, or a Wage Theft Prevention Act notice. Now, I'm going to show the letter of employers. We have this information also in Haitian Creole, in Arabic, in Chinese, in Spanish, but I'm going to show in English for now. This resource that you see right here is a script. This is how you can talk to your employer. This is really important. This is how you can talk to your employer about how to get a letter. What the letter needs to say, who will see it, by when you need it. And then if they say no, what do I do if my boss says no? You can tell them that you really need this benefit and that their information is safe, and that at most they might get a call to confirm their identity and confirm the information that they provided. But beyond that, it cannot be shared, not even within the larger department. The DOL even put it on their website that they cannot share information. On the second page here, this is also really important to screenshot, to take a picture of. We'll share the information in the chat. Zach, maybe you can drop some of these links in as we go. This is an example, very simple letterhead, name, employee, and employer contact information, a mailing address or a phone number. It does not have to be specific, and it does not have to include an employer identification number, an EIN. Does not need that. So you can provide this example to your boss, and that is going to help you get that $15,600. Now, what about domestic workers or nannies or street vendors or day laborers or people like my neighbor who sell jackfruit down the street and on Flatbush Avenue and maybe don't have a boss to go to? You should write a letter of your own. This is not promised yet, but if you believe that you are self-employed, you should write a letter like this of your own and provide that to the state. And make a case that your income was harmed because of the pandemic and it still is impacted. So if you are self-employed and provide services in the cash economy and you work in cash, but you're self-employed, we would recommend that you also provide a letter like this. Okay, I'm gonna move us forward. I know how I'm doing on time. Give me a heads up if I need to move quickly, but as we mentioned before, fundexcludedworkers.org is our coalition website. If you see here on the right, resources and facts, you can see all of the documents, including how to talk to your employer, what documents you need, a variety of languages, videos, explaining how to prepare, and more. I'm also going to show the Department of Labor website. It's dol.ny.gov/EWF. I'll put it in the chat as well. Fact sheets in 13 languages. This is where the application will launch. Okay, here you go. This is where the application will launch. So here's information. This page in yellow is what you can show your boss. If he says, I don't want to give you a letter, I'm sorry, he or she or they. You can say, I understand your concern. Please let me show you where the DOL says that your information is safe. I need you to return the favor and provide a letter of employment to help me and my family get this benefit. We fought to get this language on the website so that every worker feels empowered to go to their boss and ask for that tool. If you don't have taxes, the best way to get that $15,000 is that letter. And if you are self-employed, the best way to get that $15,000 is to make a strong case as to how you are your own employer. All right. I know this is a lot of information. As I said, in about probably the next 3 days, we'll be publishing the Haitian Creole updated graphics as well. We have a number of flyers and information to share, but I'm just going to show this website one more time. This is the state website. This is the coalition website. The state website, dol.ny.gov. All right, so how do I apply? What do I need to apply? A phone or a computer, your documents, all of them. And I also want to say this again. You can apply as an individual. So that means you're not applying for your family. Let's take for example, if I apply, I will get my own benefit. If my partner who lives in the same household applies, he will get the same benefit. If I had a cousin who was eligible and in my home, they can get the benefit. This isn't per family, this is per individual. So help your whole family apply. I see 71 people on this call, 71 families impacted, 71 people that now have the information to go and spread that word. This is not per household, this is per individual, so take advantage. Prepare your documents this week, go get that letter. Make sure that you find someone in your home who can help you apply, or someone in your community. And if not, the coalition will be sharing a list of organizations that can make space to take referrals. I'm sure the Office of the Assembly Member will also be providing assistance, but given that COVID cases are increasing, given that we are still in a quite serious pandemic, it's really important that you take this information, equip yourself with the tools you need, and find a way to do this application if you can on your own. And if you cannot, look for churches, look for community organizations, call the Assembly Member's office. We'll also share a list of resources to get an appointment. We are hoping that the application takes about an hour to complete. If you did rent relief, you know that's actually quite short. So plan to budget several hours to do it right, because you've got one shot. Let me back up. You can appeal if you didn't get the benefit you wanted, but it is best that you prepare everything so you have the best shot at the maximum benefit. You will also be able to save your application and return, but we really recommend having everything you can before you apply in case anything occurs. Thousands of immigrant workers, this is not just New York City, this is New York State. So thousands of New Yorkers across the state are going to apply for this next week. That means that you got to pay attention to the website. You got to have your documents ready. And don't give up if it feels too hard, because this is your money that you paid to the state that you haven't been able to access in the worst crisis in history, one of the worst crises for this country. So even if it feels intimidating, just know that there are advocates like Zach and I, the leadership of the Assembly Member and her team, and community members like Anna, who's an excluded worker herself. We're going to fight like hell to make sure everyone can access this benefit. We're fighting right now to expand it. So we need you to get this information and acknowledge this is for you, this is for your community, and get to work. Get to work. I'm going to drop in some more links just so it's fresh and up to date, but we can also take some questions. Thank you all for letting me talk at you for like 25 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Annalise. That was a slew of information that we all need that's listening. And as you mentioned, this is not permanent. So for those of you who are listening and you know that this is a benefit that you'd like to take advantage of, go for it as soon as the gates open. Okay, there are a number of people, organizations, as well as our office who will be able to help you there as well, but get it done and get it done early. Thank you. Thank you for that information, Annalise. So now we're going to move on to our final panelist, Ms. Jean Bay. Jean Bay is the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs at the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she led the MOIA's policy and programmatic efforts to provide critical resources to immigrant communities, including emergency fund relief, burial assistance, and CBO-led vaccine outreach. She also monitors local, state, and federal public benefit policies and advocates for immigrant inclusion. She is now sharing her screen to prepare to share information with you. She's going to share with you information about other benefits aside from the unemployment. Jean Bay, welcome.
Thank you. And I am going to speak slow, but go fast, meaning probably I'm going to pass some of the benefits to make sure we can fit everything in time. So I wanted to talk about other federal and state benefits that are also available to many people, regardless of their immigration status. And in fact, one of the key ones that this New York City is really trying to make sure people are aware of is child tax credit. This was included in one of the stimulus bills that was enacted by Congress. It's a federal benefit. And basically that any children who are living in a household with the household income that's, if it's single parent, 200,000, a married couple, 400,000, so long as you're making below that, children are eligible. And while children themselves need to have social security number, parents do not need to. So as long as parents have ITIN, individual tax identification number, they can still get this benefit. And in fact, if you do not need to file taxes, for instance, because your income is very low, you can also just provide an information as well. How much you get paid if your child is under 6, assuming your income is below the amount that I mentioned here, which I think a lot of you are, it'll be $3,600 per child. And if a child is over 6 years old or older, they will get $3,000. And then as the income goes higher, the amount gets smaller until once you reach 200,000 or 400,000, the amount reaches 0. So how do we get paid? If you already have your information provided to IRS, for instance, because you filed your taxes, IRS will basically just be giving the money to you month to month for for the 6 months starting this month. So let's say you have one child, so you get 3,600, then 1,800 divided by 6, so $300 will be coming to you every month. If it is direct deposit, it will go into your direct deposit. If you ask IRS to send you a check, you'll be getting a check. And then the rest of it, which is 1,800, you will be basically able to get it when you file your next year's taxes. You can also, if you think this is too complicated, and I tend to agree, and if you don't need the money immediately, you can also say that I will just get it lump sum when I file my taxes next year. If you are worried that IRS does not have the right information, for instance, your bank account changed, your address changed, or you have not contacted IRS before, or you don't have to file taxes, but you are eligible for the tax credit, child tax credit, you can either use IRS portal if you're comfortable with that, going to the website and doing it. Alternatively, the city is actually, we usually have our free tax preparation services a lot more expanded during the tax season. And around this time, when everyone already filed their taxes, we wind it down, but we actually invested a lot more for this and others to make sure that there are enough tax preparation services. So if you go to this website, I'll provide the link later on, you can find the tax preparation service providers near you, and you don't have to pay anything. The city estimates that there are up to 400,000 children in New York City who might not be getting these valuable money that they should be getting because IRS does not have information. And we estimate that most of them are probably from mixed status families, meaning parents are undocumented. So we want to make sure that you're aware of it and you get this money, it is yours and you should get it. And then I also wanted to talk about pandemic EBT. You probably heard about it last year. Basically, children who are in New York City, every student, no matter what your income is, your immigration status is, or whatever, in fact, whether it's children's immigration status or parents' immigration status, they are all eligible for this benefit because everyone in New York City public school are eligible for free school lunch, which is provided through federal funding. And because free school lunch was not available to many school students because students couldn't go to school, they're essentially giving this out as money. They did this last year and they're doing it again this year. So it depends on how many days the children did the remote learning instead of going to school. So if it was up to 12 days, you will be getting $82 per month. If it was more than 12 days that they had to stay home, they will get $132 per month. And again, for this, what you have to do, if you already got this money last year and you have that card, either, because your child was eligible for SNAP, you maybe have EBT card, maybe your children are on Medicaid and you got a Medicaid card before, or maybe you got a fresh new card last year when they were distributing it. And if you still have it, the money should already be there and you can use that money, and it was paid out starting June, and the next payout is supposed to happen very soon. If you lost that card, or if your address changed and you need if you lost that card or you need a new card, for instance, you recently moved here or you didn't receive PEBT last year for whatever reason, and you need to make sure that the state who's implementing this, so state is the one that's using federal funding to make sure this goes out. If you want to let the state know, there's this hotline number that you can call to make sure that they have the accurate information. If you have all this and still haven't gotten money and you're wondering what's going on, you can also call this number to find out. And then just I'm going to actually skip the ERAP because it seemed that based on what Angela said that Make the Road has already done a lot of assistance on this. But I did want to highlight two things. One is that we have an immigrant resource guide on our website where we really try to make sure it's up to date, although not always, and that's all my fault because I'm in charge of updating this website, as to what are the new benefits available and whether there is immigration status restriction or not. So it's nyc.gov/immigrants/coronavirus. I highly recommend you to go there. And I want to talk about what I think is much more important thing here, which is that I know many of you have IDNYC, and I know many of you couldn't renew it because we didn't have enough capacity last year. And this was just like Make the Road was advocating for various changes with the state relating to Excluded Workers Fund. This was one of the things that we strongly advocated, which means if you have IDNYC, even if it expired, you will be able to get full point for identity and full point for residency. Basically, you're set on those. Now you just have to, worry about proving your work-related eligibility. And so, and if you want, and another thing that I want to point out, if you are still worried and you kind of would rather have IDNYC that's current, you can do the renewal, especially if you can use the internet. You can do the renewal online, especially if your information doesn't really change that much. Address change also can be done online. So, you can do that. There are some critical information like your name change and things like that that we may need you to come in. But generally speaking, renewal can be done online. And even if you don't renew, you should be able to apply for the fund. If you don't have IDNYC and you want to get it, because like I said, it'll help you applying for the fund. We are working on expanding capacity. We are talking to the mayor. I'm from mayor's office, but we are talking to, our finance people, et cetera. Can you find the money so that we can have more appointments available? So please pay attention. We frequently right now, because of all the safety restrictions and the space issues, we haven't been able to open most of our permanent sites. So we have been using a lot of pop-up sites where we can have the, safe space where everyone can actually do it in a safe manner. So what that means is that sites change quite often and appointments go out very quickly. So I highly recommend that you visit the online portal often and sort of check the availability. It's only based on appointments right now. So you will have to get appointment online to actually get the new IDNYC application in. So that was the end of my presentation. Hopefully I kept it within time. We also have our own hotline where we have our dedicated staff that's helping you to make sure that you get the right resources and services and information. So you can call our hotline or email, or you can also visit our website for more information. I'll put all of this in the chat so that you have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean, for that information. The additional benefits, I'm sure, is very welcoming to everybody who is on the call here today. Again, another reminder for those who are going to take advantage of this, you should think of doing that as soon as possible in this process. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A, the question and answer segment of this program. And I would like to introduce Soleil Griffin, who's part of the Assembly Members team. You will hear her voice as she presents questions that has come from the guest. She'll present those questions to the panelists.
Okay, hi all. We had a few questions that had came in through email that I will read off. One of the questions is, do you have to be undocumented to collect? What if you didn't qualify for some other reason?
I wonder if that question is for Jean, for the fund. Maybe someone could add in the chat. Or Jean, you could speak to if that has an impact on
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to answer. I just felt like we have an expert here who presented on everything. So I'm happy to answer. Actually, if you listen to what Angeles was saying before, you notice she never mentioned one of the eligibility requirement is you have to be undocumented. They're not looking at your immigration status. In fact, they don't care what your immigration status is now. So you're actually, what you just have to show is that you're, as she pointed out, identity, residency, your income was below a certain amount, and that basically you lost your wages and you were not eligible for unemployment benefit and some of the related federal benefits last year. So I think actually one of the questions was, I couldn't get those benefits, but now I got, my status. What does that mean? That means you qualify. They don't care what your status is now. The idea is that because you missed out on that critical benefit that everyone got, state wants to make sure that, the state makes up for it and you can actually get that benefit.
That's right. Well, as we hear more, we are hearing and getting confirmation that having received, I think, the last stimulus check, but really some others will not have an impact on your eligibility. So as you all know, some mixed status families were eligible for one round of the stimulus checks that would not have an impact on your eligibility. Once the application opens, it will be easier to answer that question, but it's exactly what Jean said. You don't have to prove you're undocumented. You just have to attest to being ineligible because you didn't get anything, including unemployment insurance. That's a good question.
I know that this was mentioned before, but we can reiterate this. How many people from a household can collect?
So, do you want to go?
Go ahead, Zach. No,
yeah,
you.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say that this is based on the individual, not the family. So so each individual who can qualify can do it from a family or in a household.
Awesome. So what if you make more than 30K? Can you still qualify?
Unfortunately, not for the Excluded Workers Fund. But I also see Jean drawing some resources, how tax prep services can be used for your Excluded Worker Fund application as well. I know there were some questions around if we file jointly, is my salary considered part of like myself and my partners? But as of right now, you're applying as an individual. So if you made 30K, you're just a couple thousand over that threshold. Unfortunately, the state did say this program will only be for those that did not make more than 26,208. That is, you have to have made under that within a certain time frame.
Next question. Will info on application be shared with others, such as DHS?
I'm so happy that question is asked because we get to say every time that there is serious consequences for the department to share this information. It will not be shared with DHS. It will not be shared with ICE. It cannot be shared with the police. It cannot even be shared inside the larger Department of Labor. And this goes not just for you, the applicant, but also for your employer. When you submit your application, unless there is reason to suspect fraud, so please do not commit fraud on any of those applications. We know that you won't. We're talking about a very, very hardworking workforce that deserves this relief. And a lot of the rhetoric around fraud tends to be very xenophobic. But for this case, that information cannot be shared with DHS, police, or any other agency. It is purely for the application program. And then even after submitting your documents, there's a short period of retention, and then the state must remove all documents for applications over a certain time. So it is purely for the application. Your information is safe, and we highly encourage you to use this program and get the benefit you deserve. Maybe Zach or Jean can add to that as well, but.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is that so in terms of fraud, I also didn't want to like overstate so that people become terrified, you know. So when Department of Labor talked about was worried about fraud, at least when they were talking to us, what we have heard was that, and some of you probably already know, there was a lot of very massive scale sort of organized crime type of fraud relating to unemployment and some of the other benefits that were distributed last year, which is very horrible. And that has happened in many states, including New York, although I think the scale was not quite as big. And so they're very concerned about that part, which was why there's sort of like, you know, tightrope walking that they're trying to do between making sure that this, you know, money is actually available to you. They know that you need it. They want to give it to you, but also making sure that there is, you know, a way for them to account for and saying like, okay, you know, this is how much you lost, this is etc. And so I would also, you know, emphasize that the fact that you don't have like, for instance, very specific documentation like W-9 or, you know, certain pay stub should not discourage you. This money is for you, and you should actually really try to get it. As Angeles said, like if you know, need to write up your own letter, if you want to do self-certification, etc., definitely make your best case. They understand that this is a different population that they're working with, and they need to be flexible, and advocates are working on it. We're working on it. So hopefully they will also be more flexible moving forward as well.
So now we're moving on to the questions in the Q&A box. So one of the questions is, in case my 2020 tax report has already made me a direct deposit, could I not have the option for this aid? I'm not sure how this question, I don't know. Does anybody know how to answer this question?
I think what the person is thinking is kind of confusing, that this is somehow federal benefit, and like that the person got the federal money return, meaning they were paying more taxes, you know, out of their, I think that's what they're saying, out of their salary, and that they got a money return from IRS. Does that mean I don't qualify for this fund? That's completely unrelated. This is state fund. They are just, what they're checking, and as we have said, is whether you were eligible for unemployment benefit when you really needed it last year or not. And, you know, based on that, they will, decide. So whether you actually got the money from IRS this year, not stimulus checks, you know, the earlier ones, but if it was like straight tax return from the tax money that you have been paying, that should not count here.
Okay, we can only do a few more questions. Are we qualified if we receive the stimulus but not eligible for unemployment? I know that you touched on that, but we could just reiterate that.
Yeah, and I think this is what we're going to see once the application opens, given that this program has never existed. They're building it a little bit as they go. They're at this point where it's not ready. If you were not eligible for unemployment, and you can state that and attest to that, being the recipient of some stimulus checks should not impact your eligibility for the fund. Despite the messaging and the narrative of the campaign being everyone who was ineligible for certain stimulus checks and federal relief and unemployment, the DOL will not be taking you being the recipient, the applicant being the recipient of some stimulus checks as a barrier to your eligibility. So again, if you're ineligible for unemployment insurance and you didn't get some of the checks, you should not be discouraged from applying for this, for the Excluded Worker Fund.
Okay, our final question, due to time, does the employer letter need to be certified? So does the individual need to get it notarized?
No, Jean, Zach, and I were all saying no. This is really important. Take that resource that we shared on fundexcludedworkers.org. Take it to your boss, bring a piece of paper and a pen, have them write it, write that in there. It does not have to be certified, but their contact information does need to be on that letter, or the name of the employer, because what the DOL is going to do is say, okay, this restaurant, let me make sure it's real. And they might look it up. This employer, let me just call them up and see if they are who they say they are, right? So there needs to be some measure of contact information or validity that place of employment exists, but it does not have to be notarized. And the employer does not need to provide an EIN. They do not need to. It's an option. It is not a requirement.
Let me just add one thing to that, because I think there was a follow-up question in the chat relating to that. So when you read about certification requirement, that's only relating to documents to prove your identity. And even then, I know some of you asked, like, well, what does that mean? I have ID NYC. Is this a certified document? So not those type of IDs. Like if you got ID, driver's license from New York State, or state ID, or ID NYC, not those. But let's say, I think what they're looking for is, let's say you have a birth certificate from another country. And so then they want to make sure this is not a copycat, or that this is actually a real copy. So they want to make sure that there's, some, usually if you think about your own birth certificate, et cetera, there's some sort of like a seal, basically making sure that this is actually issued by the agency. That's what they're looking for in terms of those documents. And then the other part they have used the term in terms of certification requirement was translation, if you need to translate any ID document. But this is still not sure, so we need to make sure what it says once the portal is launched. But the latest we heard was that, because it's really hard to get translation certified by a third party, that's, self-attestation by either a translator or applicant saying that this is a true translation should be sufficient.
Thank you so much. That concludes my questions.
Okay, thank you, Soleil, for presenting those questions. And thank you to all of the guests for sharing the questions, so that everybody else who's listening has an opportunity to learn about this as well. I mean, this has been a great session, a lot of information, and all of those who have joined, I really hope that this has been resourceful to you. And now at the end of this program, hopefully you have the tools that you need to go ahead and apply once that portal is up and running. There are a number of resources in the chat. If you haven't already, take a second right now to copy some of those so that you can reference them. There's more questions that may be in there that has not been covered in this presentation. So I'd now like to take the time to thank all of our panelists for sharing their time with us and sharing their knowledge with our audience. I'd like to thank Zachary Lerner, Ana Ramirez, Angelis Solis, and Jean Bay, our panelists. I would also like to thank those who are in our translator rooms and for translating this information. This is very, very important for this particular type of webinar. Vanessa, Felix, Molly, Isaac, and Zubair, thank you so much. And to all of those organizations who have partnered with us, COPO, the Council of People Organizations, HAC, Haitian American Caucus, Make the Road New York Community for Change, and Moya, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Thank you for partnering with us to bring this great information to the community. This concludes our webinar this evening. Again, thank you everyone, and good luck in your application process. Have a great evening.